Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. I'm 68 years old, and every time I open my phone, scroll through any social media platform, or God forbid, read the comments on literally anything, I see the same phrase over and over. Okay, boomer, boomer greed, boomer hoarding, boomer entitlement. My own grandkids, kids I helped raise, sent to good schools, gave every advantage to. Look at me like I personally stole their future and buried it in my backyard next to the gold bars I supposedly have buried next to my swimming pool, which, for the record, I don't have. I worked 43 years as a regional sales manager and I live in a 3-bedroom ranch in Ohio. But according to the internet, I'm part of some villainous generation that destroyed the world, pulled up the ladder, and left everyone else to drown. And you know what? After spending 6 months really looking into this, talking to younger people, reading their complaints, checking the actual numbers, I've realized something uncomfortable. They're not entirely wrong, but they're also not entirely right. And the truth, as always, is way more interesting and way more depressing than either side wants to admit. So let me tell you exactly what's happening here, why everybody blames us, why we're the first generation in American history to become a universal punching bag, and why understanding this matters more than you think. Because it's not just about us. It's about what happens when a system that was built for collective prosperity gets hijacked by individual optimization, and nobody notices until it's too late. Think of the American economy like a game of musical chairs. You know the game. Music plays, everyone walks around, music stops, you grab a chair. Simple. Now, in the version our parents played, The Greatest Generation, there were 100 people and 95 chairs. You had to move fast, sure, but if you showed up and put in effort, you'd probably get a chair. The game was winnable. When we played the game, Baby Boomers, there were 100 people and 110 chairs. The music stopped, and we all sat down, and there were chairs left over. We looked around and thought, wow, we're really good at musical chairs. We must be exceptional, naturally talented. We wrote books about our chair getting strategies. We gave speeches about the importance of showing up early and walking with confidence. But here's what we didn't realize. The game was rigged in our favor. The New Deal, the GI Bill, strong unions, high corporate taxes, massive infrastructure spending, all of it meant there were more chairs than players. And because we grew up in that world, we internalized it as normal, as earned, as the natural result of hard work meeting opportunity. Now the music plays for millennials and Gen Z, and there are 100 people and 40 chairs. And we're standing on the sidelines, still holding our chairs from 40 years ago, yelling at them about walking with confidence. You see the problem? They look at us and see people who want a rigged game, then changed the rules, then denied the game was ever different, and that's why they blame us. Not because we're evil, not because we're stupid, but because we're the first generation in modern history who had it easier than our parents and made it harder for our kids. That breaks something fundamental in the social contract. That creates a resentment that doesn't have a historical precedent. Let me get specific, because I'm tired of vague complaints. In 1970, my dad bought a house in Cleveland for $18,000. He was making about $9,000 a year as a machinist. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. House costs twice your annual income. I could save for a few years, scrape together a down payment, and own something. By 1985, when I bought my first house, it cost $68,000, and I was making $32,000. Still about a 2-to-1 ratio. Doable. Tight, but doable. Today, that same basic house in a similar neighborhood sells for $340,000. And the median household income in that area is maybe $70,000. That's a 5-to-1 ratio, 5 times your annual income. And that's in Ohio, a place that's supposed to be affordable. You go to Denver or Austin or anywhere young people actually have jobs, and you're looking at 7, 8, 9 times annual income. The game changed. The math doesn't work anymore. And when I mention this at the country club, because yes, I'm a member, I get the same response every time. They're just not willing to sacrifice like we did. They waste money on avocado toast. They should move somewhere cheaper. Here's the story. My buddy Frank, we play golf every Thursday. He told me last month his grandson applied to 170 jobs out of college. 170. Got 12 interviews, 2 offers. both for $42,000 a year in cities where rent for a one-bedroom is $1,800 a month. That's $21,600 a year just for housing, over half his pre-tax income. After taxes, utilities, student loans, this kid has maybe $600 a month for food, transportation, healthcare, and God forbid, entertainment. And Frank's response was, well, he should get a roommate and drive a beater. Frank bought his first house at 26, his grandson is 31, and still has 3 roommates. Frank retired at 60 with a pension. His grandson will work until he's 75 if he's lucky, with nothing guaranteed except a 401k that's tied to a stock market that crashes every 8 years like clockwork. But in Frank's mind, his grandson just isn't trying hard enough. That's the disconnect. That's the heart of it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but we didn't design the economy this way. We didn't vote to make houses unaffordable or wages stagnant. And that's true, sort of. But here's where it gets really interesting. We participated in a system that rewarded us handsomely. And when we gained power, when we became the bosses, the CEOs, the politicians, the landlords, we didn't fix the system. We optimized it for ourselves. Look at housing. When prices started climbing in the 90s, 2 things happened. First, those of us who owned property got richer without doing anything. My house tripled in value. I didn't add a bathroom or renovate the kitchen. I just waited. That's not industry. That's luck. But it felt like wisdom because I owned the asset. Second, we started voting against new housing construction. Every zoning meeting, every planning commission, same story. Preserve neighborhood character. Protect property values. NIMBY, they call it. Not in my backyard. We pulled up the ladder. Again, not out of malice, out of rational self-interest. Higher home prices meant higher net worth. Why would I vote to lower my net worth? But multiply that decision across millions of homeowners, across 40 years, and you've created a housing crisis that's locked out an entire generation. Same thing happened with corporate behavior. In 1980, the average CEO made 42 times what their average worker made. By 2000, it was 320 times. By 2020, it was 670 times. Who allowed that to happen? We did. Because by the 90s, we were the CEOs, the board members, the shareholders. We told ourselves it was market-driven, that talent deserved compensation, that stock price mattered more than worker stability. We gutted pensions, turned full-time jobs into contract work, offshored manufacturing, all in the name of efficiency and shareholder value. And it worked. For us, corporate profits went up, stock portfolios grew, but wages flatlined, job security evaporated. And the next generation entered a workforce that treated them as disposable. When they complained, we called them entitled. When we negotiated for pensions and raises, we called it collective bargaining. See the difference? Let me tell you about my neighbor's daughter, Sarah. 29 years old, master's degree in public health, works for a nonprofit, makes $48,000 a year, lives in a city because that's where the jobs are. Student loans are $480 a month, will be for 20 years. She did everything right, studied hard, got good grades, pursued meaningful work, and she's broke. Not because she's lazy, not because she's bad with money, because the math doesn't work. I ran the numbers with her one night over dinner. After taxes, loans, rent, utilities, basic expenses, she has negative discretionary income, meaning she goes into debt every month just existing. She picked up a weekend job bartending just to break even. That's not upward mobility, that's treading water. And when I mentioned this to guys at the club, you know what they said? She should have studied engineering. She should have chosen a more lucrative field. As if society doesn't need public health workers. As if everyone can be an engineer. It's moral bankruptcy disguised as pragmatism. But now you might think, hold on, we didn't create student loans or skyrocketing tuition, and again, you'd be half right. We didn't invent the system, but we sure as hell enabled it. When I went to Ohio State in 1974, tuition was $612 a year. I worked summers at a factory, 20 hours a week during school, graduated debt-free. Today, that same school charges $14,000 a year for in-state students. Adjusted for inflation, my tuition would be about $3,500 today, but it's $14,000, 4 times higher than inflation. Why? Because state funding collapsed. We voted for tax cuts. We defunded public universities. We told kids education was an investment. Take out loans, it'll pay off. Then we made the loans non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. We let universities balloon administrator salaries and build luxury dorms, while adjunct professors made poverty wages. We created a debt trap and called it opportunity. And when kids complain about being crushed by debt, we tell them they should have made better choices. The cruelty is breathtaking when you actually spell it out. This is where it gets really uncomfortable. Because I think what drives the younger generations crazy isn't just that we had it easier, it's that we don't admit it. We wrap our advantages in the language of merit. We claim we worked harder, sacrificed more, made better decisions, but the data doesn't support that. A study from 2023 done by the Federal Reserve found that millennials, despite being the most educated generation in American history, have 40% less wealth at age 35 than boomers did at the same age. 40%. That's not a small gap. That's generational economic failure. Another study, I think it was Pew Research in 2024, showed that when adjusted for inflation and cost of living, purchasing power for people under 35 has declined by 32% compared to boomers at the same age. They're literally poorer, despite working more hours and having more education. Those aren't opinions, those are numbers. And yet, we gaslight them. We tell them the problem is their attitude, their work ethic, their spending habits. That's not mentorship. That's psychological abuse at scale. Here's the other piece that makes this worse. We're not retiring. I'm 68. I could retire, should retire, honestly. But I'm staying in my consulting role because, well, why not? The money's good, I'm healthy, and my 401k took a beating in 2008 and hasn't fully recovered to where I need it to be for the retirement I planned. So I'm staying, and I'm not alone. Boomers are working longer than any previous generation, which sounds admirable until you realize that every boomer who stays in a senior position is blocking advancement for someone younger. Sarah's boss is 71. He's been in that role for 19 years. She'll never get promoted as long as he's there, and he has no plans to leave. Multiply that across every industry, every organization, and you've got a logjam at the top. The resentment isn't just about money. It's about power, opportunity, and the future being held hostage by a generation that refuses to let go. And then there's the political dimension. We vote in massive numbers. In the 2024 midterms, voter turnout for people over 60 was 71%. For people under 30, it was 38%. We're the most reliable voting bloc in the country, and politicians know it, so they protect our interests. Social Security is untouchable. Medicare is sacred. Property values must be protected. Meanwhile, childcare subsidies, student loan relief, affordable housing initiatives, anything that would help younger people gets gutted or blocked. We've turned democracy into gerontocracy. We control the wealth, the jobs, and the political system. And we're using that control to preserve our advantages at their expense. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just power protecting itself. And they see it, they feel it, and they're furious. Okay, here's the part where I'm supposed to tell you this is all their fault. That they're soft, lazy, addicted to their phones, unable to delay gratification. And look, there's a kernel of truth there. Every generation has its problems. Gen Z spends an average of 7 hours a day on screens. That's not healthy. They've got mental health crises, addiction issues, and a weird relationship with risk and discomfort. But here's the thing. We raised them. We gave them participation trophies. We scheduled every minute of their childhood. We put screens in their hands at age 3. We created a culture of safety, surveillance, and standardized testing. And then we mock them for being the product of the world we designed. That's absurd. You don't get to build the cage and then criticize the animal for not thriving. They're adapting to the incentives we created, just like we did. The difference is their incentives suck. Now, here's the psychological twist that really explains the rage. They're not just mad that we had it easier, they're mad because we won't admit it. There's a concept in psychology called moral luck. It's the idea that people receive praise or blame for outcomes that are heavily influenced by factors beyond their control. I got lucky. I was born in 1956. The economy was booming. College was cheap. Housing was affordable. Jobs were plentiful. I worked hard, sure, but so did my dad, and his generation fought in World War II and came home to a depression. Hard work is necessary but not sufficient. Timing matters. Context matters. Luck matters. And we refuse to acknowledge that. We've built an entire mythology around bootstraps and grit and personal responsibility. Because admitting we got lucky would mean admitting the game was rigged in our favor. And that would make our success less about merit and more about circumstance. That's uncomfortable. So we double down. We blame them. And that's what drives them insane. It's not envy. It's the gaslighting. It's being told the world is fair when it obviously isn't. Let me give you the most cynical take of all. I think, deep down, we know. I think we know we had advantages. I think we know the system's broken. I think we know we're hoarding. But we're scared. We're scared of losing what we have. We're scared of retirement being less comfortable than we planned. We're scared of medical bills, long-term care, outliving our savings. We spent 40 years being told the social safety net would collapse, that we needed to fend for ourselves, that nobody was coming to save us, and we behaved rationally within that framework. We maximized our individual outcomes. We grabbed our chairs and held on tight, but in doing so, we broke the collective system. And now we're too invested to change course. So we deny, we deflect, we blame the victims of the system we benefited from. It's tragic, really. We became the thing we were warned about, the selfish, short-sighted generation that ate its young. But look, here's what you can actually do. 3 things. First, tell the truth. To yourself, to your kids, to your grandkids. Stop pretending your success was purely merit-based. Acknowledge the advantages. Acknowledge the luck. It doesn't diminish your hard work. It contextualizes it. And it opens the door to actual conversation instead of mutual resentment. Second, use your resources strategically. If you've got wealth, deploy it. Help with down payments. Pay off student loans. Fund education. Don't wait until you're dead to pass on wealth. Do it now when it can actually change trajectories. And third, use your political power differently. Vote for policies that benefit people younger than you. Support housing reform. Support student debt relief. Support childcare subsidies. Stop protecting your property values at the expense of the next generation. You're going to be dead in 20 years anyway. What's the point of dying rich in a country that's collapsing? The boomers got lucky, mistook it for wisdom, and optimized a system that rewarded them at everyone else's expense. And now we're confused why everyone's mad. Mystery solved.